Little Fox.
The Bunnies Help the Tailor. Episode 1. Busy Bunnies. Mrs. Tiggywinkle knocked on the bunny's door.
I've got your clean clothes,
She called. Mrs. Rabbit opened the door. Thank you, Mrs. Tiggywinkle, she said. Mrs. Tiggywinkle saw 3 busy bunnies.
You are learning to sew,
Mrs. Tiggywinkle said.
What a nice job.
We are making curtains.
Flopsy said.
Sewing is fun.
Cottontail said.
My cousin is a tailor.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle said.
I wish he could see your fine work.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle said goodbye to the bunnies. She brought clean clothes to more animals.
Come inside right now.
Then she went to visit her cousin. The tailor was sewing, but he looked terrible. Mrs. Tiggywinkle gasped.
Cousin, you are sick. You must go to bed at once.
The tailor hung his head.
I can't go to bed.
He said.
I must finish this coat.
The tailor held up a fancy coat.
It's for the mayor,
He said.
and he needs it tonight.
The Bunnies Help the Tailor. Episode 2. No Buttons. Mrs. Tiggywinkle saw some potato soup. She put it on the table.
Cousin, eat this soup.
She said.
You must get well.
That is Simpkin's lunch.
The tailor said.
He is my friend. He went to buy buttons for this coat.
Simpkin will not mind.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle said.
Please, you must eat.
The tailor ate the soup. Soon, Simpkin came back. He rubbed his belly.
It's time for lunch,
He said.
and I am very hungry.
Then Simpkin spotted the empty pot.
My lunch!
He cried.
I will make more potato soup.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle said. She looked around. But there were no more potatoes.
Simpkin,
The tailor stood up.
Where are the buttons?
Simpkin frowned.
The shop was closed.
He said. Simpkin stomped over to the fire.
So we have no buttons.
He said. He folded his arms and sat down.
Oh no!
The tailor sank into the chair.
This is terrible. The mayor's coat must have buttons.
The Bunnies help the tailor. Episode 3. Mrs. Tiggywinkle gets help. The tailor climbed into bed. He shivered and moaned.
Buttons. I need buttons for the coat.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle looked at the coat.
I will finish this coat. But I need help.
Suddenly, she smiled.
Of course. I know who can help me.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle ran outside. She passed the shop. She said.
The shop is not closed today. It is open.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle hurried to the rabbit's house. She knocked on the door.
Bunnies!
She called.
I need help.
The 3 bunnies opened the door.
Will you help me sew a coat?
Mrs. Tiggywinkle asked.
It's for the mayor.
The mayor?
Flopsy squealed.
His coat?
Mopsy gasped.
Let's go!
Cottontail cried. The bunnies got their sewing baskets. They hopped to the tailor's house. Mrs. Tiggywinkle started to sew. The bunny started to sew, and soon the coat was done.
But something is missing.
Flopsy said.
Buttons!
Mopsy and Cottontail said. The bunnies help the tailor. Episode 4. A coat for the mayor. Mrs. Tiggywinkle thought. She looked at Simpkin.
We cannot finish the coat.
She said.
So I will make a cake.
A cake?
Simpkin cried. He rubbed his belly.
Oh,
Mrs. Tiggywinkle said. She made a sad face.
we have no flour. And the shop is closed today.
Mopsy sighed.
No cake and no buttons.
Suddenly, Simpkin jumped up.
The shop is open!
He cried.
What?
Mrs. Tiggywinkle said.
Here!
Simpkin held out 3 gold buttons.
I was mad at the tailor. He ate my lunch.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle patted Simpkin.
It is hard to be hungry.
Mrs. Tiggywinkle gave the buttons to the bunnies. Then she looked at Simpkin.
Go to the shop for some flour. We will sew and bake.
Soon, the coat was ready.
Beautiful!
Mrs. Tiggywinkle said. Simpkin stared at the cake.
Beautiful!
He said. The tailor climbed out of bed. On the coat, 3 gold buttons shined.
Beautiful.
He said.
Thank you, bunnies.